Hello, my name is Precious Vines Harris, and I am the Single Maven. Thank you for joining me today. The Single Maven is a brand devoted specifically to helping single Christian women find empowerment in their singleness. I encourage you to subscribe to my channel, like this post, and leave your comments below. I'm also excited to announce the release of my second book, The Warrior Within, Facing Your Frustrations When You Feel Stuck. This book will be released February 2025. Stay tuned for more announcements, weekly giveaways, and more on all of my social media platforms: YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Today I'm starting a new series entitled The Review of Later Daters. Now, The Later Daters is a documentary series on Netflix which was executive produced by former First Lady Michelle Obama. This series follows 6 singles in their 50s and 60s as they try another chance at love. So each date follows up with dating advice by dating coach Logan Ury. So what I'm going to do today is actually review the first episode, which is entitled Here's to Love. I thought that this review would be a great way to talk about some of the insights that I'm sharing on the world of dating in my YouTube series that I have, in addition to how older and mature daters are navigating the dating process. So I thought this would be a great way to navigate how those things are transpiring in real life time. And I always love documentaries because it actually gives you a more realistic approach to how people are doing life and how they're actually navigating through some life topics like dating. Okay, so I do have about probably 4 pages of notes. I'm looking at my desktop now. I have about 4 pages of notes. So I've broken this up into a part 1 and part 2 because the first episode, I think maybe it's 45 minutes to an hour. I'm not sure, but I have so many notes. I didn't want to be overwhelming you in the first review. So I'm going to break it up into 2 parts. During this first review, I'm going to actually give you initial overview of the series and the introduction to the characters and some of my thoughts and the feedback that they give in the commentary about their initial introductions. Okay? So if you see me looking off to the side, I'm looking at my notes and kind of navigating through some of the things that I've actually put together as far as my review of the series. So I hope that you all are actually able to enjoy my review. This is the first time I actually have done a review of an actual series. So I would welcome your feedback. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, your thoughts on the process overall in the review, as well as what you're thinking about the series. I encourage you to actually watch the series with me so we can actually have a very informed dialogue. Now, some people actually watch reviews of shows without actually watching the show itself. That's totally fine as well. But definitely give me feedback on what you're thinking if you are watching the series. Again, like I said, it's entitled Later Daters. It's on Netflix. It's a documentary and it's executive produced by former First Lady Michelle Obama. Okay? All right, so let me actually open up with some of my thoughts on the show. So initially in the documentary, what we're giving is the actual overview in the beginning. We're told that this is a show about mature individuals in their 50s and 60s at their second or third chance at love. So we're given the name of all the daters in the beginning. So what I will say is, as I'm watching this, I just finished episode 2. You don't necessarily get all of the characters or all of the individuals in the beginning as far as them actually being shown. You actually have like a introduction to who there will be, but they don't give you all 6 characters or all 6 individuals in the beginning. So the actual list of all of the daters is Anise, Suzanne, Nate, Pam, Lori, and Greg. So in the first episode, we're introduced to 3 of those. So the first 3 would be Anise, Suzanne, and Nate, right? So I'm going to give you a brief overview of those individuals and what my initial thoughts were on each one of them. So the series opens with the question, what are you hoping for in this crazy experience? And I found that question interesting as there are 2 distinctions I found in the answers from each of the daters. In the women's response to what they were looking for, they stated they were looking for someone to find love, right? They were looking to find love. And the men stated they wanted someone to share a life with. So I found that interesting because to me, it's somewhat of a connection as it relates to how men and women view dating overall. Um, I find that there is a different approach sometimes, and I'm not saying this is a one size fits all approach, meaning all men think this way, all women think this way, right? But I think that it's interesting in the fact that there is a stereotype sometimes that women romanticize love and dating and relationships by saying that they are looking for love. But men's reaction is to find someone to share life with, right? I.e., finding a partner or a partnership. And I think that that distinction is important, right? I myself think that both aspects are important, right? If one goes into dating with a purely romantical or romantic approach and looking for love, right, I think that will hinder them having a realistic approach to dating. But I also think that, in the same token, if you're looking at it from the aspect of going into dating looking for a life partner, you may miss out on the fact that love does actually play a part in the whole dating process as well, right? So I think that maybe a mediated approach would be probably best suited for all of this. Is the fact that yes, you should look for someone to fall in love with, but also you should look for someone to share your life with. And I think also when you're talking about mature daters, and you can let me know what you think, when you're talking about mature daters, you should look at it from the aspect of finding a life partner. Because I think that it is harder when you get older to look at it from the standpoint of purely romance, right? The knight in shining armor, right? Or I'm looking for my princess or whatever, right? So to speak, because you're older, you're more established, you have done lots of things in life. And now you're looking at it from the standpoint of building a partnership, right? If you're a mature dater, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even above. I mean, there are people probably in their 70s that are still dating or even looking for the aspect of partnership or love or whatever you call it. You've actually probably purchased a home. You have secure employment or a career, building a career or a business. You may have done your educational pursuits. You may have had children. You may have been married before, in relationships before. So it's not where you haven't done many of the things that people do in adulthood. But when it comes to navigating dating per se, at this point, right, if I were to be out in the dating market currently as a 44-year-old woman, I would be looking for a life partner. I'm looking for love in addition to a life partner. But I think partnership is important because you have to look at compatibility and the fact that there are common goals that we have with each other and things that we're trying to build. So I think that is an important aspect to look at as it relates to dating. Okay. So I just want to kind of point it out. You all can leave your comments below as it relates to this process. You know, do you think men and women look at dating differently as it relates to a romanticized approach of finding love, quote unquote, versus looking for a partnership? Do you find it's different from men to women, or do you find sometimes it's the reverse as it relates to maybe the people that you've encountered if you're a woman dating men that are only looking for love and you're looking for a partnership? So let me know what you think about that. So let's start off with Anise. Anise is the first individual that we meet in the later daters. Anise is a 62-year-old Black female. She's been married 3 times. She tells us she's been single for almost 20 years. She wants to see the blind spots that she has in dating. This is one of her own self-critiques that she lets us know about. And her must list includes someone who is active, someone who exercises. She has a daughter, Dwayna. I think that's how you pronounce her name. Or Dwayna. It's Dwayna. I think it's Dwayna. With her and her confessionals, and throughout the series providing feedback. So each one of these characters we're introduced in the first episode, Anise, Nate, and Suzanne, have someone that's kind of a support partner, a cheerleader, that provides support as it relates to the dating process, in addition to the coach that they have, Logan, right? So this is my first impression of Anise. I think that Anise is a very attractive female. She definitely dresses younger than her age. In my personal opinion, this is just my personal opinion, right? I would probably tone down some of the outfits only because for me, I never want to give the approach of being too sexualized. when I'm dating or just overall. That's never really my personality. I mean, to each his own, but I'm just giving you my personal thoughts. You can let me know what you think. Because it does come up a couple of times in some of the dates as it relates to what her outfits are. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I think if you're comfortable in the skin that you're in, that's the most important thing. Being comfortable in the skin that you're in, do it. But what I think my feedback would be is sometimes people may take how you look or what you're wearing as a statement of something else. And if I see it as being too sexualized, another man may see it as being too sexualized. But overall, I think her presentation was well as far as how she presented herself. She was confident, assured. She's done a lot of things. And she is actually able to self-critique in knowing that she may have some blind spots in dating. One thing I think that stands out to me as it relates to Anise is that she tries to downplay her education. So she tells us that she started out, I think maybe she was working or something, and her first husband, if I'm remembering this correctly, encouraged her to go and finish her education. So she lets us know that she goes through, I think she has her bachelor's, her master's, and her doctorate, right? Now, I personally don't think this is something that Anise should have to explain, right? I think people should accept you as the way you are, right? But I can definitely understand her feelings and not wanting others to feel intimidated by her success, because I have had that same feeling in some aspects. Because if you're a successful woman, if you have your own home, if you purchase your own home, you know, cars, you may have degrees, things of that nature, you may have traveled. Sometimes that can be intimidating based upon who you're dating. So I definitely understand it coming from a Black woman's approach in that. But one thing Anise says is that she may be judging too quickly and needs help in the area because she can never get to the third date. So we'll kind of see how that plays out, because I think it's interesting that she says that she does have some blind spots and she may be judging too quickly and she needs help in the area. I think it's great to have an awareness of who you are as self when you're going into the dating process, especially if you're a mature dater. Meaning if you're like 30, 35 plus, 40, 50, 60, you should be aware of who you are as a person, where your blind spots are. Because if you're not aware of those things, you are definitely hindered and behind the game, I think, as it relates to successful dating, especially if you're looking for a partnership, right? You need to be self-aware about who you are. And in this process, I think it's a plus to have someone like your daughter or your friend or someone that's able to give you feedback without being afraid to give you that feedback and be honest about it, right? And you can be transparent in the process of having them support you in this whole dating goal that you have of finding a partner, or, you know, a lover or whatever you would call it. All right, so next we have our second dater, which is Suzanne. Suzanne is 63. She's a white female. She has a daughter, Allison, that helps her through the process and provides feedback. We see Allison throughout the dating process, right? She lives on a beautiful house on the lake. Now, to be honest with you, this is totally separate from this show. I love Suzanne's house. I mean, that's just my own personal goal. Like, a house on the lake is just beautiful. So, I mean, that's just kind of like a precious goal, right? But she states that she's optimistic about finding love. She also provides her feedback into what she's looking for. So this is what Suzanne is looking for. She says she's not looking for someone with a pot belly. They don't need to have big lips. She said they have to be physically fit, values hygiene, confident, and loves a good glass of wine. I thought Suzanne had quite a long list of things. And I mean, I don't think these characteristics are bad. However, I think that a lot of them seem to be superficial as it relates to physical attributes. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, right? Because you are attracted to what you're attracted to. But what I will say as it relates to that is, if, let's just say I'm going to work with you on dating and how you approach dating, you should have a list of those things, like physically, mentally, spiritually, all of the things that you're looking for, right? It's kind of like a wish list. But even in having that wish list, you have to remember that A person is a person. You're not going to get 100%. People say it's the 80-20 rule. Sometimes I think it's a 70-30, or in some instances 60-40. Okay. You're not going to get 100. And I don't think you should get 100. You know why? Because there's no perfect person. And you can have someone that God have suited for you, that it may be qualities that are not on the list, that should be on the list, because they offset the qualities that you have that may be a weak area for you. So I think the fact of the matter is, Suzanne's list is not bad. I think what it boils down to is she has to be attracted to the person. She's not attracted to pot bellies, big lips, and people that are not physically fit. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But I think she needs to have a little bit more on her list as it relates to not physical, but mental and spiritual characteristics, because those are the things that carry you, I think, a little bit farther than the physical. If you are able to move forward in such a way that, let's just say you may not be as physically fit, that may be a goal of yours, you're working on it. But you can't necessarily change people's character as much when you get older. I mean, it's true. Most of the time people do get set in their ways as they get older, and I think that's something to think about. So I think too, as a more mature dater, if you are dating, my advice would be to look at it from the lens of more mental and spiritual characteristics versus physical. Not saying you leave the physical characteristics out, but don't make that be the be all end all in how you view what you're looking for. Right? So one interesting comment I think that Suzanne makes is the fact that she said there were no cell phones when she was dating before. So in the pre-cell phone era, it took a lot of work. It took a lot of effort. And I think that is important, but it's also interesting because I kind of paused the episode, and I thought to myself, I would say it takes a lot of dating in today's world just as equally as it did before pre-cell phone. So I was just looking this up recently. I'm going to try not to detour too much, right? I was born in 1980. I have a birthday coming up in a few days. So they say 1980 supposedly is like at the end of Gen X, like we're between the boomers and the millennials. But then they say millennials started 1981. And I beg to differ. I can see attributes of me being in Gen X and technically millennial, even though I'm probably a super old millennial, if that makes sense, right? But I'm saying all that to say that my generation was a generation that saw the pre-cell phone era, the post-cell phone era, or the present cell phone era, whatever you want to call it. I remember when there were no cell phones. I remember the first cell phone I had was a car bag phone. I was just telling my stepdaughter this. And I had my first Nokia. So I remember when cell phones came out. I remember when people first started with the World Wide Web and my first email address. When you had AOL and it was dial-up. And now we're like in all the technology, advances that are way beyond the first cell phone, right? But she says it took a lot of effort. And I'm taking that to mean it wasn't as easy to access someone. But I feel like now it's actually harder to access people because we have so much technology and access. People can screen you out quickly, right? So what I put down as my note is, I think that as it relates to dating and effort, I don't think a lot has changed in that regard. I do understand where she's coming from, and I can't say that I necessarily totally disagree. I still think it takes a lot of effort in spite of the technology differences, because dating is what you make it. Dating is one of those things that requires time, effort, energy. It requires an investment. And I think that you have to be self-aware that if you want to find a life partner, if you want to find someone to spend your life with or find love, as some of these women have said, you have to put in the effort. That's one thing I don't think you can discredit, period, regardless of whether you are a millennial, whether you're a Gen X, Gen Z, whatever, Gen Z, Y, boomer, whatever. There's some boomers out there still dating or starting a date. They may have been married, may have lost a spouse, or may still be trying to find the initial one, the one, right? You have to put in effort, right? So let me know what you think about that. This is one of the questions I posed in the comments is, do you think it takes more effort now versus pre-cell phone era as it relates to dating? Now, as it relates to Suzanne, we do find out she's an optometrist. She was in school until she was 28 years old. She tells us she got married at 27 and her husband died. So she's on the porch filming. And one thing that she says that I think actually gives me a little bit of foreshadowing, there was a wind chime on her porch that was kind of like the wind was blowing and it started chiming. And she says that the wind chime on her porch is her husband, right? Her husband that died. And he wants her to find love. Now, I find that interesting. Not necessarily that I'm going to like really give her a harsh critique on that. I mean, it is what it is. I can't imagine being married to someone and then for a long period of time building a family and then they were to pass, right? But I do see some foreshadowing in that comment, and it does come up in other ways. I'll probably talk about this, if not in the next episode. I think I will talk about it in the next review, part 2 of this episode. Because I think that wind chime to me is a little bit of a foreshadowing. I think that the shadow of her husband, the shadow of Suzanne's husband, is one of the driving forces of her decision making while dating. And I'll explain this a little bit more as I move forward, but I think that just kind of gave me like open the door a little bit, and it's a little bitty crack. And that little bitty crack is telling me behind that door is her husband that's actually giving her the push or not the push, right? He's the driving force in her decision making. So there are some things that will come up later that we'll talk about to support my initial thoughts on this, and we'll see if it's something that actually plays out a little bit more. But one thing that I can say is, if you are a mature dater, you have to recognize how your past loves, your past relationships, your past marriages, or if your spouse were to pass, how that goes, how that plays a part in your future or current dating, right? How does your past relationship determine your present or future relationship, right? Or relationships, because sometimes you may have had more than one relationship that impacts who you are today and how you maneuver through dating. If you've been hurt before, it may give you the lens of not being as trustworthy, right? And I think if you had a great relationship before, and let's just say your husband or wife were to pass and you actually go through the process of grieving and then at some point decide to jump back in the dating pool, is that spouse that you had that is deceased playing a part in how you date and how you maneuver, right? So I think that's something that's food for thought that you may have to ask yourself if you find yourself in that position. The one thing the dating coach Logan says is that Suzanne has found what a lot of people don't. One great love, right? And I find that interesting because I think that it's harder, I think, sometimes these days to find that one great love. And for me, having dated, I was on the dating market for years. I mean, I was 40 when I got married, so we'll be 5 years in this year. But I was on the dating market, I'd say for at least 20 years. Let's just say I started at 20, at least 20 years, right? I think it's harder to find one great love. And that could be a whole separate vlog. I probably would do a separate vlog about finding the one great love or the one. But Logan, the dating coach, says that maybe for her, it's not finding that great love now, but a travel companion or just a companion. And I agree. So this kind of brings me back to what I initially said when I said in the beginning, women have this notion sometimes of finding love, the romantic partner. Men have this notion of finding a partner, a partnership. And as you mature, that definition of finding the one can definitely change. And I think that it can change based upon your previous relationship, how you're coming into the dating world again, how old you are and what you're looking for as it relates to your life and being compatible with your life. You have to ask yourself that question. If you are a more mature dater and you're looking at this from the standpoint of, I want to find that one great love, how may you need to change your approach, your view, your thoughts, and how that one great love looks, or even the process of finding that one great love looks for you? That's the question. So let me know in the comments what you think about that. The coach also says that you should take the conversation in an interesting direction. She was giving Suzanne feedback as far as dating and talking about things while you are on the date. Like, talk about things that you're doing, you're listening to, you're reading, like if it's a podcast or a book, right? She says one of the things you have to remember when you're dating is to be a well-rounded individual. I agree with that. I did a recent post, and I can't remember the name of it right now. It's in Dating with Intention. So if you haven't watched that series, start watching that series. But I was talking about how you need to be a diverse individual, because number one, it brings more to the table. It allows you to be fulfilled in your whole life approach. You're approaching life from a holistic standpoint, not from just saying, oh my gosh, I got to find the one. Oh my gosh, I got to find my future husband. But from the standpoint of, you are a whole person. You are a person that's able to bring a lot to the table. You're fulfilled. And when you go on dates, you have something to talk about. Okay? So I suggest you always be a well-rounded and diverse individual. Okay? Being well-rounded helps you fill in the time when you are on a dating hiatus, a dating lull, whatever the case may be. Because you have things to do, projects you're working on, and you're making yourself a better person by not just sitting and waiting for someone to call you, text you, ask you out on a date. All right, so we're going to move into the last person we are introduced to, at least on this episode, is Nate. Nate is 56. He is a Black male. He is the father of 2 daughters, and he was divorced after 16 years of marriage. So we find out that he says he's on the journey to finding the one, which I think is interesting. We kind of talked about that before, how men and women view love differently. But I think in Nate's case, we'll think about whether he really wants to find the one or not. And I think his definition of the one is a little bit perfectionistic. And I'll let you know what I think as it relates to that in a moment. But Nate did not mention love, but his comment definitely alludes to finding a partner, because he says he wants to find the one, right? Now, the qualities he's looking for include someone who's educated, curvy hips, and thighs and buttocks. So Nate is very descriptive in what he wants, which I'm not super surprised. Men generally are visual creatures, more so than women, as it relates to initial attraction. He says he doesn't like clutter, and he may be a bit OCD. So we see a view of Nate's home in the inside. It is very clean on the inside and outside, which I think is phenomenal, because not all men are, cleanly men. So I think that, and he was in the Army before. He's a veteran of the armed services. He was in the Army. He tells us that he got injured jumping out of a plane. That comes up more than once. And I think that with Nate, that may be his Achilles heel, right? And I didn't necessarily put this in my notes, but I'm kind of thinking out loud now. I think that's Nate's Achilles heel, is the fact that he is not as active as he would like because he's been injured. It comes up later on, but I think he tells us, if I'm remembering this correctly, he jumped out of a plane. He kind of broke his back in several places, and I think his hip or something, or his knee. At any rate, Nate has come out, I think, on disability, right? Nate does not like discord. He thought he would be in a relationship by now, but 10 years later, he's still not married. I know that feeling, but we'll talk about why you think Nate may not necessarily be in a relationship now. Now, the interesting thing with Nate is, like I said earlier, a lot of these people have their daughters with them. Like Suzanne has her daughter, Allison. Anise has her daughter, Dwayne. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Dwayne. It looks like Dwayne with the A on the end. Yeah, Dwayne. But Nate does not have a daughter, even though I think he has 2 daughters, and I think they're actually of age. I think they may be older. At least 18. I know one of them, I think, is at least 18, if I remember correctly. But even if they weren't, his person that's supporting him is his ex-girlfriend, Jackie. And this is the backstory with him and Jackie. I find this interesting. I want you all to let me know what you think about it. Nate and Jackie met in college. They dated briefly, had a child together, right? So one interesting fact is that they were dating briefly, and it seems that Jackie told him that she was on birth control. And somehow they were going back and forth about reminiscing about how this happened, either through miscommunication or Jackie not really telling the truth. She got pregnant, right? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Jackie was never on birth control. So I kind of have my thoughts about that. I mean, it is what it is. But they had a child together. So we have the scene opening up with him and Jackie and how they, tell how they met, how that happened or whatever. And this is another odd thing that I thought too. At one point in this whole overview, brief introduction of Nate, they're at the table eating, and then one of them asked, could they have something? They start eating off the other person's plate. I thought that was a red flag. Now, to me, I think if they're just friends, meaning, okay, they had a child together in the past, they're still friends now, their actions to me tell otherwise. And you can let me know what you think about this, but I feel like Jackie is going to come up to be one of those people that may be a stand-in that, like, remember when I said I think Suzanne's former husband is living in the shadows and the driving force in her decision-making? I think Jackie is not necessarily living in the shadows. She's living in the passenger seat. And she ain't really going nowhere. To me, I feel like, this is just me, I could be wrong, I don't eat off of everyone's plate. Even if I try to eat some off my husband's plate, I have to ask him. He might tell me no, depending upon what his mood is. And I don't really blame him, because, I mean, the way I love food. I'm like, hey, these are my wings. I done cooked all these. Get your own plate of wings. But they're not in a relationship. So people in a relationship may be territorial over their food, because I always think your own food, your personal plate of food is yours. Like, that's a territory you don't enter, so to speak. That's just me. It's like drinking out of someone's cup. I really have to trust you to drink behind you. But eating off your plate, and you on a series about dating and finding the one, how would I feel if I was going out on a date with you and I see later on you and your ex-girlfriend eating off each other's plate? To me, that's a little bit of a red flag, but let's just see how this plays out, right? We'll see what comes out as the series moves forward. Now, my thoughts on Nate is this. He will have issues finding the one due to his OCD or high standards in a woman. I think that is going to be, in addition to maybe his disability coming up and maybe feeling not self-confident, but what is the word? Self-conscious about his disability, because that comes up too. I think that his OCD and the high standards he has may come up to be a hindrance in the dating process for him overall. And this is another thing that came up when I thought about this. In his assessment of who he wants, he seems to be describing a niece. And remember I told you a niece was accomplished. She has multiple degrees and she's very attractive. She's fit. The way she dressed seemed like it would probably be 10 or 15 years younger than age 62 of what she is. But we shall see if and when Anise and Nate meet, what their assessment of each other will be. I do think that Jackie is the integral part of his life. Jackie meaning the ex-girlfriend, the one that was just eating off his plate. And I think it's interesting that Jackie is his person providing feedback on dates and such, and not his daughter or another family member. Why did he choose Jackie? I don't know, but I found it interesting. One thing that Jackie says about Nate is he is not easy to date and has too many rules. I agree with you, Jackie. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. Do you think Nate has too many rules? Now, his assessment, a lot of it is superficial as it relates to looks, kind of like Suzanne. The only one thing that he said outside of that was being educated, but he didn't give any characteristics like a humble person, a respectful person, a kind person. It was like educated, but he wanted the thighs, the buttocks, and all the other things to look a certain way. So I think that's interesting. So to kind of summarize, this is part 1 of episode 1, Later Daters. Episode 1 is titled Here's to Love. This is a summary of what we have. We have 3 daters that have been introduced: Anise, Suzanne, and Nate. We see that each one of them have a special list of characteristics they're looking for in another partner. And each one of them has someone to provide support and feedback in the process of dating, right? We've talked about a lot of different things, but I want you to definitely give me feedback and thoughts on each one of these 3 characters, at least as it relates to the overview of their initial introduction to the viewer. What do you think about them? What do you think may be their Achilles heels or red flags in the process of beginning this dating show? And in part 2 of episode 1, Here's to Love, I'll provide a review of the second half of the episode as each one of these daters goes on their first date. With that being said, thank you for joining me in part 1, episode 1 review of Here's to Love in the series Later Daters on Netflix. I encourage you to subscribe to my channel, like this post, and follow me for more inspiration. Until next time.